Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the DeadBat from Jack's 3D Printing. DeadBat I think is supposed to mean that it kind of looks like a bat that's been flattened. Little story time before we get to the goods. In this very house, I have had to eradicate 13 bats. Now I know bats are good for the ecosystem, and at first when we were getting bats in the house, I would capture them and release them. But after half a dozen or so, stopped releasing them. This started shortly after we moved in. It has decreased here recently over the last few years, but over the course of the last year, had another one in the house. And I think I know how they're getting in, which is the chimney. With my fear of heights, I am not going up to the chimney, so we have called actually a neighbor of ours who's going to come over when they have some spare time. I think they don't think we're going to pay them for their time, so we need to let them know that for sure, but they're going to come over and check it out, because I'm pretty certain at this point that they're coming in through the chimney, probably seeking warmth or something like that. They're getting all the way down into the lower level, and there's a crack in our chimney or something that they can scurry through, and then they're coming out here in the unfinished portion of the basement. So, little story time there. But the DeadBat from Jack's 3D Printing is what we're talking about today, that I have built up the 2.5-inch version, which also can run 65mm props. So that means that you can probably build it with much different components than I have, but I'm going to show you what I have today. Also, he has three different sizes actually, of the DeadBat frame that you can purchase if you choose to. They run 40mm props and what is the other size? 2-inch props. So, and you can see here we have some motor mounting holes that will allow you to run 3 motor hole mounts or motors, and the smaller 0802s or 1102s if you choose to on the 40mm prop version. Sorry, I'm tongue-tied this evening. On my build, I use these 1204 7250 kV Talon motors. You can get these motors from Heli Nation. It's heli-nation.com. And of course, the props are the Emax Avon props. My all-in-one flight controller down in there, that is the Beta FPV 20-amp flight controller. It's a little bit overkill for this power system, but it's what I had on hand. I believe this is version 2 of this, but I believe the current version is version 3. This is my receiver antenna, and that is a Happy Model EP2. Inside the canopy, we can't really see it, I have an eSheen Nano VTX. It's the version 2 with the microphone on it, but I don't use the audio from it as it still sounds pretty bad. And our FPV camera is the Caddx Baby Ratel 2. And yes, it does come with a canopy. How I have it built, it weighs 67.25 grams. I prefer to fly it on these G&B batteries. They are both 2S batteries. One is obviously 660 milliamp, the other one is 720. You can fly it on the 525, but you only get I only get about 2 minutes of flight time. I also tried the 850 on it, but I just felt that it wasn't worth the extra weight because the flight time wasn't that much different. Maybe 7 to 11 seconds. With the 660 milliamp 2S G&B battery, it weighs just over 125 grams. And with the 720 milliamp 2S G&B battery, it weighs 104 and a touch more grams. The 40mm prop version of the DeadBat weighs 3.59 grams, and the 2-inch version of the DeadBat weighs about 5.5 grams. The DeadBat version that I have built up, the 2.5-inch prop version, the carbon fiber is 2.5mm thick. It's 2mm thick on the 40mm prop version, and it's 2mm thick on the 2-inch prop version as well. Motor post from motor post, I'm getting almost 107mm. This was one of those really nice days that I had, and I think you're going to see more flight footage from this day or these days, because I was out and it was about 67 degrees. It got up to almost 70 on one of these particular days. It was kind of just a 3-day period here where the skies just cleared out. We weren't raining anymore. We had a heck of a rainstorm tonight. Actually got a little bit sporty driving the girls around this evening, but this day was certainly nice, and with me being between jobs, I had extra time, and I had charged up a host of batteries, and I ended up charging those batteries, flying those batteries, coming back inside, charging those batteries, and going back out and flying some more. And I did that on at least 2 of the days where I actually had to not only have my ready-to-go batteries and fly through those, but I recharged them to fly them again. So you're going to see very similar landscape and lighting in probably a couple of videos. That time has, of course, passed. We're back to normal winter weather, or near winter weather, And the DeadBat was one that I considered doing a custom motor mix because I don't think my tune is spot on, but I haven't done a custom motor mix in such a long time. So I didn't do it. I did what I could with the tune. Didn't try to make it perfect by any stretch. You know, I get things what I call about 60 to 70% of the way there, to where I can fly them around and have fun. And instead of going over it from a painstaking, you know, tuning standpoint, I just fly it and enjoy it because, you know, my philosophy on this is it's supposed to be fun. It shouldn't be painful. We have enough painful lessons that we have to learn in FPV. Why make the pain last any longer than it absolutely needs to. Feel free, if you get a DeadBat and you want to try my tune, go ahead. You know that if you don't have it built like mine, you shouldn't expect it to work necessarily. So if you're not using these motors and you're not using this board and all the different components, or if it weighs different, or if you got different props, what have you, the tune won't necessarily work as you see it here. But if you've built it just like I have, the tune should work in some sense reliably to what you see here. And I'll have that CLI dump link down in the video description. Of course, that has some very specific settings in it for how I built it. So if you use a different VTX, the VTX tables portion of the dump won't work. Maybe not even the protocol, again, if it's a different VTX. But anyways, I want to leave that down there for you just in case you do. jax3dprinting.com, that is the home of the Rocket Race, the 2S version that I like so much. And that is still my favorite quad. And we're going to revisit that probably next week. I've got flight footage from this 3-day period of that. And I think I want to go back and look at that again because I built another one up. And I took it out and flew it, and then after a couple of weeks of having it around and flying it, I decided I needed to get my audio camera out so I could blend in the flight audio. And after we get done with the flight, which we're nearing the end of here, I'm going to show you a short snippet that gives you kind of an idea that how I get the flight audio, because that is a question that comes up, and I think a number of people, I'm not explaining it very well to where it's not very clear that I use a secondary camera that's sitting on that table, and I'm going to show you that secondary camera view here as the flight ends. So we've come down. We got a flight time of 3 minutes and 21 seconds. That was on the 660 milliamp 2S battery, and our battery is recovering here. Recovering?
Yay! Oh. There we go.
There we go. 3.5 volts per cell, which is what I'm looking for when I disarm. So this is the camera that sits on the table just a couple of feet from me, and we're going to take off and fly. I'm only going to play about 20 seconds of this. It's an interesting view, and it's something that I think I wish I had the organizational skills or the memory to remember to have other cameras charged and ready to go so I could plant them around the yard, because I think that's pretty fun for me of blending in this sort of view to videos, and I've got a number of positive comments when I have done that for certain things. It's just a matter of me remembering and having the time. But I think this sort of line of sight perspectives gives you an additional idea of how a quad flies, at least how much distance it's covering when I'm doing certain things. But unfortunately, in 99% of my cases of the videos on the channel, it's just pointed at those two dual trees in front of where I sit. So I take this video and then I edit that into the flight footage, and then of course we don't see this view typically. We see the FPV view, what we see in the goggles, but you hear the audio from this camera because that tells you how things sound, because a lot of people want to know how a quad sounds. That way they'll know if they'll attract any attention that they might not want. Okay, so a couple of details about the build. You know, I went real low profile on the build. I wanted to get my canopy down low. I know that you can build these, you know, you can put a little 5mm standoff nut in here, and you can have your canopy up higher. That will allow you more freedom for the different components that you use. The Ishii Nano version 2 VTX is pretty small, although the OVX, the Open VTX Happy Model 300, OVX 300 is even smaller, but the soldering holes on this thing is so small. I don't think this is it. Got two sitting out here. This is it here. The holes down here, you can barely see them. They are so small and so close together. It is hard to get a good solder joint on there. I think it was this one that was actually started out in there, but I ended up killing it because my 5-volt wire came off. So I started having video problems, and then it would come back, and of course, because the canopy covers everything, I didn't know what was going on. And I think the 5-volt line may have touched something else. It still powers up, but I'm not getting any sort of transmission out of that. But this one's smaller and lighter, but it's just, I like it, the video reception at 300 milliwatt, but it just, those holes are so small, and even all these years of soldering on micros, I'm not able to get a reliable joint on there. I think it either needs to have bigger pads or spread them out over the corner instead of having them all right in this corner so it can have bigger pads, or it needs to have a connector, which my understanding, Jai Smith, who was the man behind this, sorry, the camera's not liking to focus on this little guy. He recommended a connector, but Happy Model chose not to use it. So I ended up going with the Eachine Nano VTX, which is inside here. It's the version 2 with the microphone. So you have to be a little bit careful about your motor choice and having the length of motor wires, at least the way I ran them. You can see here, hopefully, that, you know, the motors, this is something else. And this is a kind of a critique of Jack's frame. So no offense, Jack. These are just things that I noticed in my building process. I know I didn't get you this information beforehand, but I'll send you a note before I publish this video. So the motor wires have to be a certain length, specifically if you want to do the motor wires along here, which I think is a little bit of the magic of these sorts of designs, that you don't have a lot of prop thrust blowing down onto your carbon frame. It's mainly going through the frame and propelling you to do whatever you're trying to do, versus having an arm, a traditional arm out here. We just have those smaller arms and they're split up. So I think we can get more thrust through that. So you of course don't want your wires blocking that, so you need to run your wires over here to make sure they're long enough. Now generally speaking, they should be long enough if the motors you're choosing to use are acceptable up to a 3-inch prop. That rear motor should be long enough. The front really isn't an issue because it is so much closer in this unique design. One of the other critiques that I have, you know, I've used a lot of tape. I could have done better, I think, as far as my tape goes and my routing goes. I think one of these actually has, this arm right here has 2 layers of the tape underneath it. So yeah, I could have been a little bit cleaner there. And the other thing is maybe I missed the design intent on how we should mount our battery. I really didn't want the battery sitting kind of cockeyed. I wanted the battery to come across this part right here, so that when it sat here, that we weren't blowing a lot of our thrust down onto the battery, versus if we put it this way and we ran a strap this way, where you, in my opinion, you would be blowing more of your thrust down on the battery versus this way, because we've already got the arms kind of in that path. And so there really wasn't anywhere for me to use a rubber band to just natively connect to the frame. So I put a zip tie right here, which helped to actually secure my battery lead. You know, I like to do that. I like to make sure my battery lead has a little bit of security. So I just kind of looped them both in there, and then I used the front canopy screw with some extra length in order to be able to put my rubber band in there. Now this isn't easy to get in there with it down all the way. If your canopy sits a touch higher, you have more of a gap. The canopy kind of curves back here behind the rubber band, but because of the length of the screw that I have and the position of my canopy, it's real tight in this little area where you have to take the rubber band. So what I had to do was actually wedge something in the front of it so I could kind of create a larger gap between the screw and this front canopy lip, and then I can get my rubber band down through there. Not a huge deal, but it is, you know, a slight inconvenience. Also, to hold my VTX antenna, I just took my soldering iron and warmed it up and poked a hole through there, run a zip tie. Just kind of holds this in place. It's not hunkered down by any stretch. It's just holding the antenna in place to make sure that it doesn't, you know, flop down and get into the props, because that would create sadness as we'd have to open this all up. Also, you probably can't see it, but I have got metal nuts on the bottom. Maybe you can see that one there just a touch. There's a metal nut on the bottom, and that secures the screws to act a little bit like a standoff, and I do that on most of my builds. I add a metal nut down there to the bottom, and finding metal M2 nuts is a little bit of a struggle. You usually have to buy those in a kit. I've bought enough kits and have had enough quads in that I have a collection of those now, but that helps to give you a lot of rigidity. One of the things that I try to avoid is wondering whether my canopy is loose, causing jello, or I've got a tuning issue that I need to sort out. So that's what I do to kind of ensure that the canopy, it doesn't make it fussy getting your canopy all the way down here. You know, you have to kind of work things down, and you can't have the screw taut until you've kind of got the canopy in the final turn and a half position. So there is some fussing that we have to do, and that's not specific to this. It's just specific to how I build micros and getting the canopy down low. Jack's prints are real nice. He cuts his own carbon. He prints his own canopies. He likes using multiple colors. I think I have another canopy. Let me get that out. Actually, I have two other canopies here, so you can see he uses the same colors but different design schemes. And they're basically, I call this the pickle pod. I don't know if this is the actual pickle pod design or not, but it's the basic sort of pickle pod shape in my opinion. But real nice, clean prints. You can see here on the back of the fins that they don't come natively with that hole. I made that hole in mine, as I explained earlier. And then we have, if you look at the screw holes down here, you know, they're real nice and clean. They give you a nice spot. You don't have to drill those out in order to get your screw started or anything. Just apply some pressure to the top as you're putting the screw up into the hole, and it will thread up just fine and stay in there real good. I mentioned running a custom motor mix, and I don't know how much value there is in me actually talking about that very much, but I think it's been 4 years since I even investigated a custom motor mix. You know, Betaflight has gotten so much better at handling different sort of configurations that I'm not sure it's necessary. I may have not just tweaked it out enough. No, I'm of course not an expert in tuning, specifically tuning Betaflight. I think I do better tuning EmuFlight, which is kind of an older version under the hood of Betaflight 357, which is a real good version of Betaflight. I think Emu is still based on 357. I might be wrong in that, so no offense to any of the Emu devs who are working on that, and if you've updated, but I'm running Betaflight 4.2.8 on this one, and as I said, I'll have a link down in the video description to that CLI dump. As far as a build cost, I think these motors are about $12 or $13 each. A board like this, these prices are going to vary. We've seen prices change a lot in the last 6 to 8 months in our hobby. So then the board is going to run us about $45. The camera, the Caddx Baby Ratel 2, which is a camera I really like, and I think it's underpriced in my opinion. It's a camera you can oftentimes pick up for $25. The Ishi Nano VTX is still pretty reasonably priced, somewhere around $13 to $15 depending upon where you buy it. And then you have the props, which I couldn't remember how much a set of props for these Emax Avons cost. I would have to guess somewhere around $3 for a package of 4. Maybe you get a package of 8. So that's basically your build cost. Of course, you know, there are little things like screws and tape, and, you know, I've got a capacitor on here, but I didn't need that capacitor. The capacitor was actually already on the board from another project. And then you have a little bit of a battery mat down here, and then rubber band and zip tie cost. So, you know, this build is probably going to run, if you were to build it like I did, probably somewhere of north of $150. It would be my estimation here in the moment. But we've gone through the prices, my estimate prices on everything, so my math could be way off, as I did not write that down and do the math to get us a total. But that's a question that often comes with. You should expect to build something like I've built here of about $150. Of course, the frame pricing, I can tell you that without having to send you over to the website. This particular frame is $20 with the canopy, and these frames come in at $15. So if you want the smaller versions, they're $15. I believe these come with the canopy as well. Jack's got other frames on his site. He sells printed frames if you have an interest in those. We have the TKS Rocket Race, my favorite. It's still being sold over there, and I know friends that are in countries outside of the U.S. that it can be a struggle to pay for shipping for some of these frames. So you buy a $20 frame, and it costs $20 to ship it to you. Yeah, I understand. That's rough. It's too bad that we can't all live in the same sort of shipping zone, so prices wouldn't vary so much. I guess that's the nature of those big oceans and us being spread out. So that is the DeadBat from Jack's 3D Printing, and I'll have a link down below for easy clickability over to Jack's 3D Printing. No affiliate or anything like that. I don't ask for anything from Jack. Not that I ask for anything really of anyone. He sends me stuff. I don't think I even ordered these frames. So thank you, Jack. Thank you for sending me some extra frames. And Hopefully, a few people out there are interested in a little bit of a unique design and you enjoyed the flight footage and you might want to build one up of your own. I've talked to a number of people here recently who have been doing bind and flies, and they're trying to kind of stick their toe into the building waters. And I think that's a good next step in this hobby for a lot of us. You know, there are a lot of really good bind and flies out there, but when it comes to 2S quads, which I think there's a lot of development room in, we don't see it that much. So if you want to build one of your own, you could definitely use lower rated ESC on your all-in-one board. You could probably, even with these motors, go down to something that's 12, maybe 15 amps, and it would be fine. Running 2S, of course, on those as well. Overall, the build isn't all that expensive, and the frame certainly isn't very expensive, especially for the quality of cuts that I've seen Jack providing a lot of people. Jack also has a Facebook group, jacks3dprinting.com. I'll link that down below. There are a number of people that Fabian, Kyle, I'm sorry, I can't remember all the member names to the Facebook group, but there's a lot of people in there that are pretty active and doing different builds, and they can share their experience with you as well. If you do have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. DeadBat from Jacks 3D Printing. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.